house has burned down. Now where will we go? Our house has burned down. Now where will we go? Now where will we go? Now where will we go? The invisible magician has cast a spell. We're stuck on the edge. Get me out of this hell. Get me out of this hell. Get me out of this hell. Get me out of this hell.
Okay, 170 feet is good holding. 1 foot per second down. Speed it up a little bit.
And suddenly that was very personal. Instead of being an intellectual knowledge, those were my molecules. And it was a visceral experience, an overwhelmingly powerful visceral experience, and accompanied by a bliss and ecstasy. And I never had that type of experience before. And that's another story. We can talk about that later. But what it made me realize is that since we were the first generation of spacefarers from Earth, and humans forever had been asking the deep questions about who are we, how do we get here, what's our relationship to the cosmos, and I realized that our story of ourselves as told by science was likely incomplete and perhaps flawed. And the story of ourselves as told by our cultural traditions, normally rooted in religion, were archaic and perhaps flawed. And maybe we, as the first generation of spacefarers, probably needed to be thinking about these deep questions all over again from a new point of view. And that was what was going through my mind. And as I thought about that, and after the fact, after the flight, and started to understand this experience that happened in space, I realized that what we were dealing with was the nature of consciousness. Why are we conscious? And of course, being trained in the sciences and the technologies, I quickly realized that studies of consciousness and mind had not been a part of science for the last 400 years.
We are poisoning the air, poisoning the land, poisoning the water. We're consuming the Earth's resources at an unsustainable rate. And it's also something that drives a lot of the conflict that we see in the world, because we're being taught that not only are we just machines made of matter, evolved apes, we are machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival. Partially, at least partially, what lies at the root at the very intense levels of conflict that we see on all levels of human society. There's conflict among individuals, conflict among races, conflict among nations, conflict among classes, conflict among religions even. So I think the solution to all those problems lies in developing a new sense of self, a new identity, getting new answers to these fundamental questions. Who am I and where did I come from? I think the alternatives to the current materialistic answers to those questions lie in a more spiritual direction. So the real answer to the question, who am I, is I'm a being of pure consciousness. I'm not a machine made of matter in competition with other machines made of matter for survival. Actually, not only am I a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, and everybody is ultimately a being of pure consciousness. You know, we should be trying to satisfy our material needs, cooperatively in the most simple, natural, and efficient way possible while trying to elevate our consciousness, putting most of our human energy into that. So the balance between those groups is what determines the kind of world that we experience.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I like to think of it that way. If the brain and the spinal cord and the spinal fluid is the antenna, then your state of emotion, or you could say the heart, is the dial that's tuning the radio, right? And so that dial can be tuned. You know how when you tune the old kind of radio, the crystal radios, you know, you had to just nail it so there was minimum amount of noise. So you can have a lot of noise, or you can have really high clarity in what's coming in, right? And so that implies many different things. I mean, of course, your state of emotion, and we're seeing that with epigenetics, that your state of emotion actually changes the genetics of your. It's actually changing the antenna. It's literally tuning it. But as well, you know, what you're eating, how much you're exercising, how much sleep you're getting, like all this stuff is how well your antenna is tuned and how well it can, like, you know, oscillate in the structure of space-time and download the information. And as a result, how much influence you have on the morphogenetic field, you know, and how much you can influence your own life to produce a feedback effect from the universe that is most desired.
So all of these things, we're talking about the stale, the branch, and the pine cone, and you are all built off very simple mathematics. In fact, the mathematics that can be found within a pentagram.
Yeah.
Within literally just drawing a star. So, you know, when we talk about these, you know, basic fundamental math, this is what I want to do. I want to go back, you know, in our modern time and go back and learn the ancient knowledge, you know, and bring that back. Because once people understand that, we'll see it everywhere, and it makes more sense. It allows you to see harmony in our creation.
Well, I do tend to think of culture as different forms of magic, and you can see it as black magic. A lot of hatred and negativity that's spread massively, a lot of fear induction on the part of the media is it's like black magic. It's casting spells and hexes into people's minds. It's giving us a sense of hopelessness instead of a sense of what's possible. So it's necessary to know where we are at. I'm not advocating hiding from any of the realities. I think it's all important to actually have even fuller and more disclosure about everything. You know, I want to know how bad it is.
Because as I'm thinking about what we're doing here, and Chris and I have spent many a night conversing over what kind of speakers we want, what kind of people we want involved with this project, and it is people that are interested in that idea of empowering people to at least have the ability to contemplate these things in life. Contemplate something outside of your regular everyday grind. Contemplate your existence. Contemplate meaning. When you're seeking knowledge, it is something you are seeking. When you're seeking truth, you are searching for it. Doesn't mean you're going to find it right off the bat, and your ideas of those things are going to change. But what we find really important for people to understand is the notion of freedom and what freedom really means. Freedom starts within your own being, first and foremost. If you can't even be free inside your own mind to allow yourself to think outside of those parameters just for a few minutes, to contemplate who you are, why you're here, what's going on, you know, all of those dynamics, then talking about having physical freedom is you can't even get to that stage. So if people are stuck in a prison of fear and trepidation over every little thing. Like, look at the news right now. World War III is on the horizon. There's a war that needs to be fought. There's an economic collapse coming. There's all of these things. And while those realities might be in place, the only thing that gives them any truth, back to that word again, is our acceptance and belief in those things. And that is what this system, in my opinion, is reflecting. And we're trying to get people to think outside of that, become empowered. We're trying to create a safe environment for everyday average people to come, whether they have knowledge in these fields or not, but to come in and join this conversation, contribute their energy, and at least learn one thing. If they learn anything out of this tour, it's that, how do I free my own mind? If I can start there and I can start looking outside the box and seeking knowledge now, then I'm not just getting fed things and just believing everything coming down my way. I'm now taking the reins back in my own life.
Well, they're not supposed to, though, Sheriff, and they're bound by their degree in Egyptology, and it's very, very strict. So when I led numbers of groups there, and I would always, you have to have the tour guide, the Egyptian tour guide, and I would pay them to be silent. Because the minute they started talking about all that warring stuff, it just turned my stomach, and so it isn't that common that they know. But things like the helicopter and the plane at Abydos, they tell everybody not to show it, not to point it out. So when I go in there with my group and get everybody behind and point to where it is, they go, how do you know that's there? Right? So really, we still live in an age where we're told what to think, and the Egyptian temples speak for themselves. Like, if you go and stand, because they're accurately replicating the cavities of the human body, and the pyramids are replicating the whole DNA, and then the planet and the solar system and the galaxy is all kind of a mirror in the quantum physics sense. You can have an experience regardless of what anybody's saying.
Right, yeah.
But if they distract you and say, go look over there, then it doesn't work the same way. And so, no, it's not common knowledge. And tourism has not recovered. It's at 5% of what it was over the years. And I've been going to Egypt since 1977, and steadily, since 94. And so, it used to be where there'd be like 30 buses in the parking lot at the plateau, and where we're the only plane on the tarmac. Last group I led going to Luxor and back from Aswan, and no buses in the parking lot at Saqqara, which is one of the biggest sites. So it's not recovering because the mainstream media has done so much about, ooh, it's so scary, 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 scary. But it isn't, and the thing is that to me, it's the same old Egypt. It's Egypt, okay. And when you land, they haven't been watching CNN. They don't know that we demonize all things Middle Eastern. They don't listen to our media, and so they don't know we're talking really bad about them. And they're happy and extroverted and wear their hearts on their sleeve. And the minute I get there, I'm like, what a relief, because we're not in this machine. Even if you don't watch the news, even if you don't participate in that ideology of them, it's still in the collective. And we live inside that. And to me, it's just such a relief to be outside of that headset.
Yeah.
And that just shows you how much pressure there can be, inside a culture that's trying to get us not to like somebody.
Now, if you look at a human being, and this is what I discovered when I was researching all these matters, a human being essentially corresponds to this architecture that I've described for a Tesla coil. Essentially, we have within the human being, we have the heart circulatory system, and that system is of course a closed system, and through the pulsing of the heart, which is an electromagnetic pulsing, it creates a kind of a frequency signature, which is essentially the frequency signature of who you are. It is that detailed and contains that kind of subjective information. That closed heart regulatory system is analogous to the primary aspect of the Tesla coil circuit. In my understanding, this heart circulatory system interfaces inside ourselves with a fundamental polarity of what I've come to understand as the head brain and the gut brain, which are connected by very strong nerve centers running up your spine. Now, the head and gut, many people probably don't know, but when you are developing as a fetus in your mother's womb, the head actually splits off from a larger neuronal mass, then floats up and becomes the head. The other part, which is the other half of that neuronal mass, it floats down and becomes your intestine. Now, the intestine is a coiled unit. It's very, very different from the brain, from the head brain. But both are brains. Both are made of neuronal circuitry. But they are fundamentally opposite in their configuration, so that you have this, again, this fundamental polarizing going on within the brain-gut system, which, in my understanding, and relating this back to a Tesla coil, corresponds analogously to the secondary open circuit system of the Tesla coil. So it kind of struck me that wow, the human architecture is this closed, open architecture, and by open system I mean and these realities are becoming more demonstrated and documented as time goes on. But we have many so-called paranormal effects where people they hear something, they see something internally, they get ideas and visions they can't explain as coming from without, etc., etc. So we seem to be tapped into the rest of the universe by some means, and I think in my discoveries of applying, let's say, this Tesla coil analogy to the human architecture, I think I've discovered basically how all that works in its most general terms.
And so the idea that like the cat is alive and dead in superposition inside the box, the Schrödinger box, and it doesn't reach its final state until you open the box and look at it, is very much human-centric. The idea that, because it assumes that because the cat is in a box, that it's isolated from the rest of the universe, where what I'm saying is that actually the universe is not confused about the state of the cat, just the human that's beside the box. And if the universe is requiring that you have a live cat, it will give you a live cat. And if it's requiring that you have a dead cat, it will give you a dead cat. And so the idea that you can isolate systems and analyze them that way is inaccurate. And that's why we run statistics, because the complexity is so high in the individualization that we can't figure out where the particle is. So let me give you a better, I believe, and this is emerging finally after 25 years of me saying this, finally this is emerging. I'm thanking the universe for that one. Pilot wave theory is much more accurate description of the double slit experiment. That is, that you can explain everything that happens in the double slit experiment, including the observer, by understanding that particles are actually moving in a field. So of course, if you have a particle that's moving, in a field, it makes waves as it moves, just like a boat makes wave on the water. So people at MIT starting in France, but eventually people at MIT put, a fluid, it's a silicone fluid with silicone beads, and then vibrated it and put the double slit, and they got all the same result with fluid dynamics.
Yeah, there's a, as you said, like exoteric and esoteric, there's a metaphysical and a physical aspect to numbers. There's no question that there's a qualitative or a quantitative study of math, right? An engineer will tell you, of course there is, right? I'm gonna make something square, it's gonna hold this much weight, it's like, and you crunch all the numbers and you figure that out. The thing that an esoteric study of math will lead you to is the fact that there is this sort of mystical aspect of math, and the fact that it's mathematical mathematical and there's an exactitude and precision to it that allows you to actually verify that there is this sort of magic creative force within it, you know? So it allows you to see both sides. So the one thing that I'm trying to show is that, okay, modern science, contemporary science is trying to basically understand the creation of our universe through physics. Physics is basically the box that they throw everything in. Now, when they do this mathematical deconstruction of the beginnings of, you know, the Big Bang, and they try to find the Higgs boson and stuff like this, they're understanding math in this just narrow-minded way, just very skewed way of looking at mathematics, right? And you can prove that you can use mathematics in all of these different ways, and once again you can prove it with the exactitude, and you know you're going to get the same result again and again and again. You know what I mean? So therefore there's a verifiability and repeatability to some of the things that, you know, that we're going to be talking about on the tour. You know, because, you know, we could talk about mirroring in mathematics. We could talk about how numerology actually will produce theorems, not theories, theorems. You know, things that can be proven. You know, we could talk about how mathematics has manifested itself in language. You know, so all of these things, and I think in general and through all academia, most of this stuff is just dismissed, and that's really tragic because it really answers so many questions.
That loves us. I believe that we're on the, you know, the brink of post-materialism. You know, people are awakening to the worlds that we're painting. The reason that our paintings are of any interest at all is because they more or less mirror other people's inner dimensions. That means there's a likeness of our oneness that can be pointed to and affirmed, and has been by visionary artists throughout the world. Our notion is that this is the seed of a understanding of creativity as spirituality, and as a way that all great wisdom traditions have related. They've all used creative expression. And it's our oldest link with our ancestry in the caves. You know, this is the first touch that we have of our humanity, and perhaps our quest for leaving a message and creating with people beyond themselves and things, with working with the spirits and with spirit.
And I had seen it before. This thing is the image that is known for the labyrinth, and if you look at the center of it, and it's the legend is it's all at once a labyrinth, a brain, and a pyramid. And so it's my conviction that these are multidimensional ideas, signatures, symbols, about biology and cosmology and astronomy and archetypes along the edges here. And it's, you know, it hasn't been deciphered. And this was a copper engraving that was done in 1670.
Well, pattern comes from the word pater, and pater means father. So pater is Latin for father, and it's where we get the word pattern. So when we talk about the sacred aspects of these sort of things, right? We have to realize when the ancients were mystically and poetically saying, "Our Father, who art in heaven," well, that's exactly, when you break it down like etymologically and look at the roots of these words, that's exactly saying that the patterns who artistically created. Do you understand that? You know, because that's literally what the words mean. So when we talk about geometry helping you come to understand the patterns, which are the father, this creative force in creation, right? Right, yeah. When we talk about the chicken and the egg, what came first? Well, there's an answer to that question. There's a direct answer to that question. How many animals or species lay eggs? Birds, fish, snakes, right? All these things lay eggs. How many things lay chickens? Chickens. The chicken is one form in creation. The egg is an archetypal form that has been around, that you see in all these different, and even you were sprouted from an embryonic egg.
That's right.
So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, math and your study of symbolism and geometry is going to tell you the egg came first. The egg came first. So there's an answer to that philosophical question. It's not just a big conundrum, you know. And this is why you have like the Hiranyarva in Hinduism. This is this like basically this first form or structure egg, the cosmic egg, the Orphic egg. You'll see this time and time again because it's a fundamental form to talk about life.
So you're saying crop circles then they're for everybody, but embedded within the message or the symbology of the crop circle, it can influence people that are on different aspects of their individual journeys. So a highly advanced spiritual person will receive what they need to get out of that one particular message, whereas a newbie or someone just breaking into the field and discovering themselves for the first time will get their message out of that same crop circle. Okay.
And you, looking at a crop circle, filling your field with what you believe it is, in 3 years you're going to look at it and see something very different.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
And it doesn't mean the message changed, it means you've evolved.
But the message itself, a picture's worth 1,000 words, a crop circle is a picture.
It is.
Right? So you revisit that again and again and again, you'll tease out more information from it as you evolve as a conscious individual.
Right.
Okay, wonderful.
Another thing about the patterns, no matter if it's a code or a geometry or a pictogram, a lot of them are symbols. Just a symbol where you'll see the triangle, you'll see the circle in the square in the circle, you'll see, you know, the eye of Horus. But when they give us symbols, what they are compressed files of tremendous amounts of ancient wisdom. So when we look at a pyramid or a triangle, it does something to the mind where it's like the word Christmas.
Okay.
Where you go, it's just a little word, it means a tree and presents under it, but it also means shopping and food, and you know, so like one little word has all these meanings. So when you look at a symbol, it wakes the brain up to all this information. So a lot of them are just compressed files. I got this from Mary Rodwell. She talks about the symbols on spaceships that she gets through a lot of her contactees. I just loved it. I just think that the compressed files really make sense.
It does make sense.
It's an instant thing when you look at an image and you go, boom, in your brain, and you come up with all this data. It's like, where'd that come from? Why did it tell me so much? It's just a symbol, but it's also in the pyramid, and it's also in the Nazca lines, and it's in a crop circle.
And once I started investigating, just through that, you know, that small crack in the kind of like the system understanding, the conventional system understanding, eventually I found myself down a rabbit hole, and it was a rabbit hole that actually really started making sense of things that had bothered me all my life, but things I couldn't really give a name to or put a voice to, short of, you know, doing what I did was to dive down that rabbit hole and begin exploring matters that are off-planet, larger than, you know, the typical kind of cosmologies presented in common discourse in universities and whatever else. And you're right, I have had experience in a lot of the institutions here, at least in Canada, and at a very high level. Like most of my work was either could be categorized as very high or at the very highest level of the institutions in which I worked. And I never, you know, working in those places didn't solve those questions for me. So that was an interesting part of the backdrop that informed my wanting, you know, to take a look outside the institutional realities that I had experienced from the inside.
But each of the 100 trillion atoms, right? And then from the solution we're finding for the proton, the nucleus of the atom is made out of trillions and trillions of little Planck spherical units, which you can think of as little bits of information. And so there's this incredible information network going through these micro wormholes in the structure of space-time that are being discovered now, you know, by some of the greatest physicists on the planet, like Saltzkin and others, that are showing that actually entanglement between particles is the result of wormhole activity in the structure of space-time. And so, like, the whole thing is talking to you, and you're talking back. And it's just this incredible miracle of creation, and it's just an amazing thing. And to discover it and to realize that it's there is critical to our consciousness and our awareness and our capacity to produce what we want.
So this is what I think awakening people are seeing. They're trying to see beyond the divisiveness of warring factions.
It makes
and
every other fight seem
pale.
By comparison, it doesn't seem as important.
A distraction.
Right.
Truly a distraction and a kind of arguing at the precipice rather than being focused on turning the ship around and pointing out the positive things about humanity and the web of life that are so beautiful and so much an expression of a creator that loves us.
It's really it's profound.
I think everybody thinks that the universe happens or experiences happen to us. But actually, what we have to get our heads wrapped around is it doesn't happen to us. It happens through us. It happens inside of us, and it happens alongside of us. So we're walking hand in with us, and we're walking hand in hand with this. So nothing's external. Everything's internal, and we're expressing that, and that's basically, like you said off the beginning, and it's like an analogy is we're basically reflections of the universe, each and every one of us, and we have
to be careful though. Everything is internal, is not a complete statement. Everything is internal and external to any frame of reference, meaning that you would say, well, it's external to me, but it's internal to the universe. So, depending on the frame of reference. So what I'm meaning by that is that, yes, we are creating our reality, but yes, reality is creating us at the same time. So we're in relationship to the whole thing.
Right.
So you might intend something, but because all of the rest of the things that are going on are have an influence as well, you might not exactly get what you expected,
but you'll get what you needed, though. You'll get what you needed.
Exactly. So that you can learn. Because if you got exactly what you expected to intend every time, you would stop learning. The universe would end.